and well-known military officer, a former special forces man, a guy who, after he served his country as a military man, then went back and began chronicling wars for us. You've probably heard his name. You've probably read some of the stuff he's done. He's among the more famous of our military chroniclers in the last couple of years. His name is Michael Yon. He worked in the Special Forces, served in the Special Forces of the U.S. Army in the 1980s. And in the 1990s, after leaving the military, he decided to go back and chronicle war, give the fighting men and women on the front lines of war their due, their say, what they were learning about, what they were hearing about, because many times the dispatches that come from war correspondents are controlled by what they're allowed to see from the Pentagon. The Pentagon has enormous control capabilities over the news. And so when you see these things, you begin to realize we may not always get the truth from dispatches of reporters who I think are trying to give us the truth, but they may be constrained with the access they have, the locations they're allowed to go to, what they're allowed to report and not to report. And so Michael Yon has been a guy that has broken through those barricades of information and given Americans dispatches from war for more than 3 decades now. Many journalists celebrate his work. He's a little bit of a rebel. The military doesn't always like him, but they do respect him. The fighting men and women respect him. Some of the military brass have clashed with him because at times he forced into public information they didn't want out that was embarrassing to them, their chain of command, their execution of plans. Well, he's back at it, working the ground in Afghanistan. He's actually in Central America right now, but he was running an operation over the last few days to get out some Americans. These are U.S. citizens. They have their identity as Americans, their IDs, their passports. They were trapped in the Kabul area. The U.S. military was not willing to go get them, even though they are our people. And he tells a story of what happened. And I want you to listen to it in a second. But first, I have to set it up with this revelation. The Pentagon is saying any American who wanted out could get out. Now, Michael Yon, you're going to hear from right now. We're going to play the first clip. He tells you what happened to one group of American citizens who tried to go to the gate at Kabul. Here is what he said transpired over the weekend, just a few short days ago. You compare this to what President Biden's administration is saying. Let's listen.
There's a lot of Americans that have been turned, not just Americans, also SIV holders, right, and high-value targets, and some of your friends as well, turned away literally at the gate by our own Army, which they're lying about right now. But yeah. I personally know and was involved in an operation 2 nights ago. We had a friend with 3 jets on the ground, civilian-funded, empty. His name's Rick Clay. He's okay if I say his name. And so he had the jets. He and his team had the jets on the ground, had other people on the ground that were, somebody from Pineapple was helping out as well. And long story short, we actually got 4 American citizens, a mother and 3 children to the gate, to the South Gate. And we had Taliban take them to the South Gate. That's how they got to the checkpoints. So we literally had Taliban take them to the Taliban checkpoint at South Gate.
Amazing.
And American forces would not come out and get them. And we were talking with all the right people. We had them out there waving their passports, screaming, "I'm American," and that sort of thing. And the Taliban were like, if Americans will let you in, we will let you in. They literally, Taliban would have let them go in. This is the kind of insanity that we're down to.
All right. So that's pretty clear, right? You understand what Michael's saying. Well, I pressed him further. Who was it? Who were you talking with? Who were you dealing with? What authority did they cite to turn away this American? And Michael said that he was dealing with a lieutenant colonel in the Army. He has the messages between him and the colonel that verify this. We've seen them. And here is what he says the colonel told him and who the colonel was taking his directions from. Listen up.
I was on the phone with him and chatting all day. And then finally I set up a group chat with the principals who were making this happen. So I got everybody together, got the American citizens together, got the Taliban doing their thing.
Right.
And then we get them to the gate and the U.S. Army completely fails us, saying, "Oh, we can't do it because the Department of the State tells us we can't do it."
So the State Department, they're claiming that the military took their orders from the State Department. Is that correct?
As clear as day.
Wow.
Like unambiguous. It's not even remotely ambiguous. They're very clear about it. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So you're now a combatant commander in combat, right?
All right. Did you hear that? The lieutenant colonel says he wasn't taking his instructions from the chain of command of the military is taking them from the State Department. When did the State Department get command over what our U.S. military soldiers do? A fascinating moment. This is coming from a guy that's been on more wars than I can count on two hands. He's been in battlefields all over the country. He knows how war is fought. He knows what military men and women do. He knows what the chain of command does. He himself, you heard in his voice how shocked he was that there was Americans turned away at the gate by a U.S. military commander at the instructions of our United States State Department. That's what he's alleging. He has firsthand knowledge because he says he was running the op with other people on the ground. All right, now, take that into consideration. That's exactly what Senator Ron Johnson was saying yesterday was going on. He wrote a letter to the Defense Department. The Defense Department's been spinning, we got everybody out, everything's fine, right? Well, Michael Yon's text messages, his account don't jibe with the official story. That's exactly what Michael does so often. He finds stories that cut against the official narratives that our government often try to sell the American public. Now, he also describes that the situation on the ground is getting worse since Americans pulled out. Why? Well, the Taliban's in control. That's one part of it. But he says many of our major foreign adversaries, the Chinese intelligence service, the Pakistani intelligence service, the Russian intelligence services, are now on the ground working with the Taliban to make this a worse spectacle for the United States. Listen to what Michael had to say about that.
One of the concerns, though, with that is that we know Chinese, the MSS, intelligence is working with ISI, which is Pakistani intelligence, and GRU, the Russians are all over there. They're working the cell phones, and they're working, exploitation of all the computers and all these sorts of things. So this is now a multivariable environment that's much bigger than just Taliban.
All right. Now, if you're not disturbed enough, I've got one last piece from our interview with Michael that really stood out to me. We're going to play more of Michael's interview over the next few days. We're doing some reporting and working on some stuff, so we're not ready to release all of it at one time. But we're going to give you one last piece because this is something we have heard from multiple U.S. officials in the intelligence community, the Defense Department. The United States left behind, among its many $85 billion of equipment that we apparently left behind, biometric systems where Afghans' biometrics, their fingerprints, their facial recognition components were stored. And according to Michael, and according to our intelligence sources who confirm Michael's accounts, those biometric systems now in the hands of the Taliban and foreign adversaries are being exploited to hunt down the Afghans who supported the United States that could not get out of the country, are still trapped there under Taliban rule. They're hunting them down, assumably to imprison them or execute them. But listen to what Michael had to say about the danger of leaving behind sensitive biometric systems like he says the United States did, and like our sources confirm were left behind. Listen to Michael.
But keep in mind, every one of those systems that we had, apparently about 7,000 left behind. That number is unknown, actually, but it's some large number. But it's 7,000 is a number that's been said. I do not know if that's true. But if you have just one, all you need is one, and there's more than one, it will be loaded with that data. And so they've got all the tech geeks in the world. They'll get that data off and be able to use it. And then once they've got, as you know, once you've got the data, then, it's a matter of going and buying other systems and putting the data in. And then you can use it in their high-definition cameras.
All right, we're going to give you more of Michael's interview over the next few days and weeks. We had a long conversation today. We learned a lot. We're going to report out some things to bring context and detail to it. But just think of what you now know as we head to this commercial break. Think about this. We now know that contrary to the official story of the government, there is evidence, first from Ron Johnson, now from a trusted former Special Forces office soldier who now is a famed war correspondent. Many people have trusted that there were Americans turned at the gate who didn't get out before the last jets roared out of Kabul. We also know that the excuse that the military gave for not allowing American citizens into the Kabul airport was the State Department wouldn't let them do it. Now, we also know that the Chinese, the Pakistanis, the intelligence apparatus of Russia are on the ground with the Taliban, which makes it even more perilous for those left behind, whether they're American or Afghan, to survive, to get to freedom, because now you've got a witch's brew of the Taliban and 3 or 4 adversarial intelligence agencies free to roam the grounds because there's no American presence. And think about the last thing you just heard, biometric equipment we left behind with the biometric records of Afghans now being used to hunt down America's allies in the Afghan population for obviously nefarious purposes, to arrest them, execute them, whatever. We don't know, persecute them. 4 remarkable revelations from one war correspondent, one former Special Forces soldier on the ground. That's what we try to give you every day. News you aren't getting from anywhere else. We're going to go to a quick commercial break. We're going to give you some more news from our next guest, Chris Kobach, the former Kansas City Secretary of State, now running for Kansas Attorney General and working as a private lawyer to challenge some executive orders that are forcing ICE, the Immigration Enforcement Agency, not to follow American immigration law. You're going to hear all of that exclusively from Chris Kobach right after this commercial message.